Hey folks, Richard Tubb here with another episode of TubbTalk. Now, in episode 19 of TubbTalk, I spoke with Michael George, the CEO of Continuum, an outsourced NOC provider. There was a lot of interest from listeners in that episode and the topic of what Continuum and other providers do for managed service providers. So it's well documented. I'm a massive fan of outsourcing, especially of your NOC. More accurately, I'm an evangelist of partnering with external suppliers, master MSPs, you might call them, like Continuum. So recently, when I spotted some research by a very well-respected benchmarking provider by the name of Service Leadership on why Continuum partners are growing faster than other MSPs, well, you could say I was intrigued. There was two figures that jumped out at me specifically. One, Continuum partners achieve a gross margins on managed services that are 8 percentage points higher than similar MSPs. And secondly, Continuum partners realize adjusted EBITDA percentage that is 7 percentage points higher than their peers. So when you see those type of figures, you sit up and pay attention. I certainly did. So I reached out to Bob Kosis of Continuum, who himself was a guest on episode 20 of this podcast. And Bob connected me with Service Leadership directly so we could talk more about this research. Which leads us to today's conversation. And I'm joined by Paul Dippell, the founder and CEO of Service Leadership. How you doing there, Paul?
I'm doing well, Richard. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Really good. I know you're there in Dallas, Texas. I'm at home in Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK, and it's the summer here, the 2 days of summer we have, and we've got Dallas-like weather at the moment. It's about 30 degrees Celsius. How is it over there in Dallas?
Yeah, fantastically hot. If it's not 100 days over 100, it's not summer in Dallas. So thank God for air conditioning.
I join you on that one. Now, I want to jump into this report that that Service Leadership put together. But for anybody not familiar with Service Leadership, could you give a quick overview of who you are and what you do?
Sure, thanks. Well, we started out as operators. The first solution provider company we built to about 130 million and sold it to one of the phone companies here. The second one we built to about 2 billion and took it public. The third one was a $400 million turnaround that we sold to Xerox. And then the last one ended up being the largest SMB managed service company in the U.S. So a fair bit of operating experience. And then, for chapter 2, we decided to give back to the community and share back as best we could what we've learned about running these businesses well. So Service Leadership basically does a couple of things. We do a fair bit of management consulting one-on-one with solution providers across all the business models, including MSPs, and helping people get to the MSP business model. And then we're the largest scale financial and operational benchmarker of solution providers on the planet. Basically by an order of magnitude. So we're fortunate to have solution providers, MSPs, CSPs, VARs, et cetera, subscribing all around the world. About 10% of them are from the UK. Each quarter they put in their income statement in a particular format we request, as well as their balance sheet and their org chart. And each quarter we send them back a private 85 metric report that compares their performance against the top quartile in their business model. So that's where all of this data comes from. We have a lot of operational experience, and then I think we probably have about the best empirical data you can get. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do. So we're a little tiny firm, 12 people, don't want to grow it anymore. We don't work in any other industry, Richard. We're completely useless outside of the IT solution provider world. We have opinions, but they're useless. But in this space, we think we know a little bit.
I would say so. My own MSP, we actually used to subscribe to the Service Leadership Index report and submit our figures. We got great value from that. And actually, Paul, you helped value my business, my MSP business for acquisition many, many years ago. So thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate it.
Yes, and you're on to your chapter too, so good for you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we've already established that you're pretty much independent in the industry, like myself. You stay vendor neutral, but Continuum have sponsored this benchmark report, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But I'm intrigued. How did you ensure that you remained impartial and neutral when it came to this particular business? Continuum.
Yeah. This one's raised some eyebrows. So, over the years, as you probably experienced as well, over the years, different people at different, of the major vendors will come to us and say, "You have all the data, Paul. Prove that our partners help us prove that our partners are more profitable than our competitors' partners," and variations on that theme. And we have, for obvious reasons, resolutely declined to do that. Interestingly, the reason we do that is obviously reputation and credibility, but another reason is that choice of vendors, generally speaking, doesn't make a bit of difference in the financial performance of the solution provider. That doesn't mean that a solution provider won't, beat the heck out of a vendor for a better price. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at all the different influences on solution provider profitability, things like where they are and what vendor they pick and what customer segment they pick, those things have very, very little influence as compared to what we call operational maturity level of the management team of the solution provider. So one reason we've always turned down the occasional request from vendors to prove that somehow their partners do better than others is it's just the right thing to do from a credibility and honorability standpoint. But secondly, you'll end up finding there's a random walk there. There is no difference by vendor. What happened in this case was a little bit different. Continuum did not ask us to produce this particular analysis. They hired us to do a different analysis, which we did. And that was, hey, Paul, amongst the Continuum partners, those who are Continuum partners and who are in the top quartile of profitability, how do they use Continuum differently than the partners that are at low growth and profitability? So it wasn't meant to compare Continuum partners to non-Continuum partners. It was meant to compare high-performing Continuum partners to low-performing Continuum partners, because quite wisely, what Continuum wanted to do was understand how the partners who had the best growth and profitability in their partner base were using Continuum as opposed to the Continuum partners who were at lower performance. Smart question. And we did that analysis. The way we stumbled onto the current analysis that we're talking to is actually a little bit embarrassing. Obviously, I am deeply ingrained in this industry, and I am obsessed with finding out what works and what doesn't work, because I fundamentally believe that solution provider owners need to do better. They need to get better reward for the risks and the work that they put in. And there's a big difference. Top quartile EBITDA percentages for MSPs is 18%, and median is 8%, and the bottom quartile lose money. So there's a lot at stake here for what, as you well know, most solution provider owners, their business is their primary asset in life, right? Mm-hmm. It's the thing they're going to sell and ultimately, So this is a big deal, and we're obsessed with it. And so one weekend, as I was doing the other analysis that Continuum actually hired us to do, I was goofing around with the data, and I realized that there was a different situation with a master MSP than with another vendor, a Cisco, an HPE, a Fortinet, what have you. Those choices between hardware vendors, choices between software vendors, as I mentioned, have very, very little effect on the profitability and growth of the solution provider. But in this case, as you know, master MSP says, hey, solution provider, you don't need a whole bunch of technical people. We have them. And you don't need a whole bunch of process, policies, and procedures, because that's our job, is to serve you on a service level basis. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that a solution provider, an MSP, doesn't have to invest in and doesn't have to manage on the cost side of their business if they go with a master MSP. And that's fundamentally different from a hardware vendor or a software vendor, something they're reselling. We're talking about real foundational changes, and I know you know this, in the way the MSP works. And so I was sitting there working with the data for the other purpose, and I went, I wonder if there's some detectable difference in gross margin and profitability between those who use a master MSP and those who don't, because we have that data, right? Because of all the folks that we benchmark. Excuse me. So I separated them into everybody that we knew worked with Continuum, which Continuum gave us a list of who they work with under confidentiality, of course, and everybody that didn't work with Continuum. So here's the common wisdom and where the common wisdom is wrong. The common wisdom says, hey, I don't want to use a master MSP because I will get more gross margin if I do this business, if I build my own NOC and my own service desk. And it seems entirely logical. I mean, let's just say, Richard, for the moment, that there's 60% gross margin between whatever the cost is to be an MSP and what you could reasonably get if you're good at value-based selling in the marketplace. Let's just say there's 60% gross margin. Best in class is actually about 53%, but let's just say 60%. If I use a master, that's if I do it myself. If I use a master MSP, logic says that I'm going to have to split the margin with the master MSP because they're not in this for free. They're not going to charge me their cost. So let's just off the top of our head say the master managed service provider has to make 30% margin. And I got to make 30% margin because my SG&A is probably close to 30%, maybe 25, what have you. So, logic says if they got to be profitable and I got to be profitable, we're going to split the margin, and therefore my gross margin will be lower than if I do my own managed services. That's sort of the foundational objection that solution provider owners and executives often have about a master MSP. I know I'm going on here, but I'm getting to a point. So that was the assumption I was testing, and it was really just my curiosity and my drive to find out what really works. And I can tell you I was astonished at the results. I remain astonished at the results. I'm going to tell you in a few minutes, I'll tell you what we're going to do about that astonishment. But what we found is what is published on the Continuum website, which is that the folks that used in the data set that we examined, at the time we examined it, I'll underscore that, the Continuum folks had higher gross margin on their services business and overall than did the people that didn't use Continuum. They also had faster growth. And because they had higher margins, they had a better bottom line, even though they actually spent more on sales, which I'll get to in a minute. So what the heck is going on? I mean, it really stopped me in my tracks. What's going on? I think there's a couple of things going on. One of them is it's hard to run an MSP business, as you know.
Definitely.
It's a great business model once it's set up and once it's running at maturity level on our scale of 1 to 5 operation maturity level, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6, it starts to get pretty good. And by 4.0, it sings right along. But it is not an easy business to set up. And the average MSP is running about an OML 3.4. There's still a lot of guys running OML 2.9, 3.0, 3.1, 3.2. So it's a really hard business to set up and run. Done right, it's a thing of beauty, and it is the highest value, most stable solution provider business model, but it's hard to set up. In addition, let's say you have 10 technical guys. Let's say you're doing your own service desk and NOC. You're not using a master MSP. You have 10 technical guys. if you are at 50% gross margin, which you should be, and you're spending 30% on SG&A, sales general administrative, you're putting 20% at the bottom line, which is basically best in class. Fantastic. If your business is growing and you go, heck, I'm about to close this contract and I need another guy. My people are flat out, right? So you add an 11th person. So that will hammer your gross margin down to about 35% on the service side, which if you're spending 30% on SG&A takes your profit from 20% to 5%, which is flying pretty close to the map of the earth, unfortunately. So you hire that person in order to take that one contract, but that one contract is typically not big enough to add enough revenue to fully offset the cost of that person, right? Mm-hmm. So for some period of time, your margin is down. And if you look at the average rate that a SMB managed service company adds customers today, which is unfortunately fairly slow, and we're working on that, you then realize that it's 6, 8, 10 months before they add enough contracts to offset the cost of that 11th person and get themselves back to 50% margin. So you have now torched the year, right? You basically torched the profitability for the year because you added that one guy. And if you're 20 technical people and you add one guy, it's still a very noticeable effect. And so I think part of it is simply that the master managed service providers allow you to dial up capacity incrementally, contract by contract, without taking that risk.
That makes sense.
And then if you look at everything, I know I'm going on here.
No, it's all carry on.
If you look at everything, thanks. Dear. If you look at everything that goes into managing a team of 10 or 15 or 20 technical people or 40 or 100 or 500 technical people, there's just a lot of ways to leak productive utilization. And the higher you get in operational maturity, the more effectively you plug those leaks, and the more effectively you get higher revenue for what you're doing. But think of all the effort that goes into that.
Yeah.
And if you think, okay, well, let me put it this way: we identify or encourage MSPs to work on 39 different operational maturity level traits, we call them, to be good at being an MSP. There are 39 OML traits that go into being a good MSP. A master managed service provider, Richard, takes 13 of those right off the table. So, sure, it leaves 26 that I have to master to be a good MSP, but shoot, 13 of them off the table.
Yeah.
And many of those are related to keeping technical people productive. So I now don't have all those productivity leaks, or most of those productivity leaks, if I use a master MSP. And I can turn my attention to other things. Yeah.
Forgive me for jumping in, Paul, because this is absolute music to my ears. I've been, sort of banging the drum about outsourcing and about outsourcing NOC and the master MSP model for years and years and years. I used to do it within my own MSP. I know this stuff works, but it was always a gut feeling. So this is now the metrics that actually prove it. But we'll just pause there for a second, because we've mentioned a few acronyms, specifically operation maturity levels. Just very briefly, can you explain? I'm aware of what it is from the Service Leadership Index report, but for anybody who's new to SLI reports, what would you say operation maturity levels are?
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's almost impossible for me to be brief. I think you figured that out already.
This is
I'll
good.
try.
No, please, carry on.
Yeah, right. So when we built our first solution provider company, I mentioned 130 million. We had 9 locations, which means we had 9 general managers, 9 sales managers, 9 service managers. Second company, we had 44 of each of those. We had 44 locations. The third one, we had 14 locations and 14 teams like that. And the last one, we had 18 locations. So if you're running a multi-location operation, Richard, and you reach your corporate profit goals that the board has set by having a third of your branches underperforming, a third of them at plan, and a third of them above plan, even if you meet your profit goals, you probably won't get a bonus. You may get fired. And the reason is that random distribution of success means that any given location's success is solely based on the management skill, what we call today operational maturity level, the management skill of that local team. And you have no systematic or programmatic way to help those teams be successful. It's basically up to them. So you lose your job. So we got very good at assessing the management skill, the management methods used by the general manager, sales manager, service manager, each of these locations. We got very good at systematically diagnosing where they're strong, where they're weak. Specifically, what things that they do are like, do they do the way the top performers do them, and what things do they do in ways more like the way the bottom performers do them. Okay, well, if I can tell across sales, service, finance, strategy, and compensation, which things that you do are most like the way the top performers do them and which things that you do are most like the way the bottom performers do them, then I can easily hone in on things that need improvement, and I can help you do those more like the top performers. So that objective assessment of management methods is what we continue to build on when we built service leadership, my current company, and that we bring to solution providers worldwide today. So, yeah. So we have two pieces. We have the Service Leadership Index, which is the financial benchmark, and that answers the question, how am I doing? And then we have the operational maturity level tool, which answers the question, okay, how do I do better? And it asks you how you do these 39 different things in great detail. And then it shows you where you are doing those things like the top performers. And it shows you where you're doing those things like the way the median performers do and the way the bottom performers do. And then it hands you the specific best practices to get better. So that's where that whole OML thing came from. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That makes a lot of sense. And we should say the OML levels, they're not, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, it can be 1.1, it can be 2.3. There's increments in there, isn't there? So let me ask you this. We've already pointed out that the report highlighted that working with Continuum partners, it takes a lot of those, dare I say them, call them tick boxes, or that maturity required away from the MSP needing to do it, and because Continuum are really good at what they do. What would you say are the biggest differences you spot between MSPs with an OML in the operational maturity level in the region of 1 and those who are, you know, right up there, have got everything nailed down in the 5? What's the biggest differences you spot between those companies?
Yeah, great question. So the labels we give, I know you relate to this because everybody that's built a business relates to this. The levels are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The labels we gave them, 1 we call emerging, 2 we call, 1 we call, you'd think I'd know this. 1 we call beginning, 2 emerging, 3 scaling, 4 optimizing, 5 innovating. So I mentioned 2 we call, OML 2 we call emerging. We used to call it the pit of despair. And that always got a laugh out of the audiences full of solution provider owners, because everybody has been in the pit of despair, and a lot are still and fighting the good fight. So I was about to give a presentation to about 900 partners for a major networking vendor, and the gentleman that hired me said, you can't say pit of despair. That's insulting. And I said, no, it'll get a great laugh. And he said, no, you can't use that. And I said, well, what do you want me to use? He said, use emerging. So OML2 is now emerging. That's a much politer way of putting it. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Yes. So the characteristic of OML 1 and 2 is, OML 1 is you don't know what you don't know. And we've all been there, right? Hey, I can bill my time. Great. I'll start a solution provider company. OML 2 is where you're finding out how much you don't know. OML 3, at this point, the metaphor I use a lot, Richard, is bicycles. So at OML 1 and 2, pedal motion doesn't necessarily translate into forward motion. The handlebars flip to the left or right. You fall, you spin your knee, you bump your chin, and you go, man, that's no fun. And so it's very hard to make progress and not get hurt at OML 1 and 2. Mm. By the time you get to OML 3, you can stay on the bike as long as the terrain is relatively even and you're kind of shaky and you're not necessarily always going perfectly forward, but at least you're not falling down going boom and hurting yourself very often. And those guys, the OML 1s and 2s are typically the ones that are struggling to grow at all. And they're typically either losing money or breaking even. The 3s are typically growing somewhat and are at median profitability, call it 8%. And by the time you get to about 3.8 or 3.9, you've hemmed in a whole bunch of things, 39 of them, to be specific, that are now, they're not only not dragging you the wrong direction, but they're actively working together to produce increasing efficiency and so on. Mm. So I'll give you an idea. Let's just take pricing, MSP pricing. So maturity level 1 and 2 generally engage in what we call market-based pricing. And that is, I can't be the most expensive guy. I've talked to prospects about, what prices they're getting. I've talked to my staff about prices they saw at the places they used to work. And so I'm going to sort of base my pricing on market-based pricing. And that comes out at, X per user per month or however you want to do it. You go along with market-based pricing for a while and you do win deals, but you typically find out you're losing money. And the reason for that is, although it varies a little bit by market, about 30% or so of MSPs are still at kind of average OML 2.6, 2.7. And those folks generally don't have a good understanding of their cost. They generally don't have a good understanding of their income statement. So they often don't know they're losing money, unfortunately, Richard. They often, they just go, well, last year I paid myself $100,000. This year I'm going to end up paying myself $40,000. But hey, $40,000 is better than zero. Yeah. And I had to write a check into the business,
I say it all the time.
So you go along at market base. Yeah. So 30% of the guys in the market don't know how to make money, and they often don't know they're not making money, unfortunately. And you go along at that price for a while, and then you go, man, I don't know how these other guys are making money. That's the false assumption. The truth is they're not. But I know my cost now. And I know for me to make the margin I need to take my cost and times it by 2 to get 50% margin. And that's what I can't take another money losing contract. I don't know how I'm going to get this new price, but I can't take another money losing contract. And of course, the false assumption is the guys selling at the old price are making money. They're not. So you raise your price, usually by double, sometimes by triple. And you grimace and you go out and you make sales calls and you don't sell anything for 6 months because you can't figure out how to justify that price, but you get better and better. And you finally close a deal and you go, what? Holy cow, people will pay this price. And you're more profitable and you close another one and another one and another one. And so, you're at OML 3 and we call that cost-based pricing. And you're probably making 8% of the bottom line and you're closing deals and it's great. And then about 2 or 3 years later, you'll close a deal, Richard, where you'll walk out and you'll go, I have this weird feeling I could have charged that guy a lot more because the value he saw, right, was much higher than the value I was talking about. And so the next time you go make a sales call, you go, why don't I focus on the value of this to him, on helping the prospect understand the risk to the prospect's business goals if they don't take advantage of it. So if they keep doing IT in the crummy, 2 men and a dog way that they do it today. And suddenly you get 50% higher than your OML3 price, which was 2 or 3 times higher than your OML2 price.
Yeah.
And that's called value-based pricing. And if you look at the top performers, that's what they do. So that's an example of low, medium, high OML.
That's a great example. So I've got a question around operation maturity levels and specifically this Continuum report. So do Continuum partners have a higher OML because they are Continuum partners, or do they become Continuum partners because they've got a higher OML? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. The answer is yes. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. Part of what happens is if there are 39 OML traits of being an MSP and I've effectively outsourced 13 of them, I can spend more time on the remaining 26 and drive those higher faster, right? So part of it is that, I believe. Whenever it's a little bit like asking why do guys that belong to solution provider peer groups perform better? Because on average, they do. And it's that same chicken and egg. Is it because what they're learning in the peer groups and the accountability and all that stuff is driving better performance and higher maturity? Or is it because the higher maturity guys go seek out peer groups? I think the answer is both. I just think that if I may flatter you for a moment, you took a look at your MSP business and you went, man, there's a lot to this. And maybe the first thing I shouldn't do is go build my own, room full of blinky lights and big monitor screens. Maybe what I should do is go sell some stuff.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at and so you chose to go with a master MSP. So if you look at most MSPs today, I think, most of them will tell you they're struggling to grow. They've spent a ton of time building something to sell, and it's getting pretty good. Okay, well, let's go sell some. Well, you short-circuited that whole thing and said, if they can do a good enough job, if the master MSP can do a good enough job for me, then maybe I'll just let them bear the risk of that whole operation, and I'll go sell some stuff and see if I can get that off the ground. Yeah.
Makes absolute sense. And I want to delve into that a little bit further if we can. So in your opinion, why do Continuum partners grow faster and have higher performance? I guess what I'm saying, Paul, is how do they use Continuum specifically? For instance, how much of their managed service offering do they actually share with Continuum? Do you have a reach for those sort of figures?
Yes, we did a sort of tipping point or materiality calculation where we said, look, if the MSP is spending at least 80% of their managed service cost of goods sold on Continuum, then we're going to say they're materially using Continuum to operate their managed service business. If they're spending less than 80% of their managed services cost of goods sold with Continuum, we're going to put them in the other bucket. That's a pretty stiff test, right? So that was the dividing line between the two populations, and it tended to fall pretty heavily. It tended to be a pretty clear delineation. In other words, not so many people are just using Continuum for this little bit or that little bit. There were clearly some MSPs that were giving their few worst clients to the master MSP. That was clearly going on. You could tell, but that tended to be the minority. And the majority tended to either really just completely rely on the master MSP or not rely. So anyway, repeat the initial question.
Yeah, so it was how much of their managed service offering do they push to Continuum? So I think you've had, the most successful ones, it sounds as though don't sort of dip their toe in the water or don't just give across their most horrible clients. They go whole hog there.
Yeah, and you're correct. And you also asked why are they able to grow faster?
Yes. Yeah,
I think it's a couple of things. One of them is you may have noticed that they're spending more of their revenue on sales and marketing.
I did notice that. Yeah,
and so I think
why is that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the relevance there is, if I'm not using a master MSP, I've got this payroll to cover. And that's a scary thing. We all know as business owners that not being able to cover payroll is pretty much the end of the world. And so business owners tend to be very, very conservative financially in order to make sure they can keep paying their people. And so if I've got 50 people or 20 people in my company and 2/3 of those are technical because I'm not using a master MSP, I'm going to husband my cash and be a little bit more conservative about what I'm going to spend on sales and marketing. Mm. When I could take, 2/3 of those 2/3 people and push them over to the master MSP, then I don't have as much payroll to cover. I feel from a risk management standpoint like I can spend a little bit more on sales and marketing. So I think that's one reason they're growing faster. I think another reason they're growing faster, Richard, is that they can incrementally add customers without this herky-jerky motion of, I got to hire another guy before I can bring that customer on.
Yeah, it gives
them the third reason,
instant scalability, yeah?
Yeah, yep. Instant on, right?
Yeah.
For a new client. And I think the third and last reason is if I don't have 39 OML trades to pay attention to, then I have more time to spend on the remaining. If I don't have 13 OML trades, then I have more time to spend on the remaining 26, of which about a third are sales and marketing trades.
Yeah.
So I can just spend more time running the sales and marketing business in my company.
So right there,
I think all of those.
There is a huge one. So most MSPs that I speak to who are trying to grow say, all this sales and marketing stuff, this is good. I want to do this, but I just can't find the time. There's always fires that need putting out. So I think if I was to paraphrase what you said there, would you agree that you're saying that, those fires don't need putting out because Continuum, the master MSP, have got those fires under control, and that frees up the MSP's time to do the business growth activities?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. I'm not sure there's not a personality trait here as well, because, and I'll include myself in this. I am fascinated with the technology, and I built in my career. Yeah, I built in my career many service desks and NOCs, and I love those things. I just love the challenge of putting them together and the operational piece. It's really fun. If as and I'm fortunate in that I also have interest and a little bit of skill on the sales and marketing side. So the two together are good. The fact is, if I was strong technically and didn't really have a predilection for sales and marketing, I'd probably go build my own NOC and help desk. And then I'd worry about how to sell it later. Right. Well, if you're a little stronger on the sales and marketing side and less so on the technical side, maybe you go, hey, I think I'll get a master MSP to shoulder the blinky lights part, because I'd just like to go out and sell it. I know I'm simplifying things, but I think there's personality traits that go into this. I do, if I may, I want to underscore something about this analysis, and I want to make sure this gets to your community. The results surprised us, and I chose to publish them. Again, it was not part of what Continuum had asked us to do, and I chose to publish them, which, again, in our duration of service leadership, 15 years, whatever it is, we resolutely stayed away from producing data that favors a given vendor, because, as I mentioned earlier, for the most part, there isn't any opportunity there. This was really the first time we looked at master MSP and MSP relationship and the COGS and the profitability and stuff. Our goal is to serve the community. Our goal is to serve the owners, because we believe they need a better shake in life. That's our fundamental belief. So we chose to publish this, and we took some comments about it. I want to underscore, this is a point-in-time study. It was that set of MSPs at that time. It was not a longitudinal study. So starting Q2 of 2019, we will alter, and you know this from your experience with us, we will alter our what we call normalized solution provider chart of accounts to allow our benchmarking clients to separate the managed service COGS that they are spending on their own people in their own facility and their own systems from whatever managed service COGS they happen to be spending on a master MSP. And we will track this longitudinally. We'll make it a standard measurement so that we can actually, on an ongoing basis, track the difference in performance between those who use a master MSP and those who don't. I think this is potentially a fundamental change in the business. There are massive pressures on MSPs, as you know, today. The speed with which the M&A market is consolidating MSPs is blinding, and it's getting faster. The amount of money that's being dumped into the MSP world by private equity groups consolidating managed service providers is huge. In fact, HIG Capital in June invested in Escastle, which is a leading MSP for hedge funds. They have offices in the UK. I mean, it's in fast forward, and it's about to go into double fast forward. And so to the points that we've been talking about, Richard, as an independent managed service provider, I've got to get more efficient, and I've got to focus on driving sales. I've got to focus on winning new customers.
Yeah. Because
R&D costs are going up, sales and marketing costs are going up. We all know what's happening in the technology payroll world, right? So I got to get faster. I got to get better faster. And I think against the pressure of increasingly large players and increasingly well-funded players, and against the pressure of everybody gradually getting higher in OML, I think an increasing number of MSPs will seek ways to partner to reduce their risk and improve their flexibility. And I think master MSP is one way to do that. I think this is the beginning. I think we're headed into a new chapter, if you will, in MSP evolution. And I'll make another fearless prediction about master MSPs. Historically, master MSP has been, well, I'd like to get in the managed service business. I don't want to take all that risk. I'll use a master MSP until I'm up to a particular size, and then I'll take it in-house. That's been sort of the standard rationale. I have a fearless prediction. My fearless prediction is OML4 guys are going to start using master MSPs. Guys that have this absolutely whipped are going to get out of the business of having their own NOC and service desk. Not all of them. That's not what I mean to imply. But I think increasingly more will. And the reason is, once you get up to OML4, you start to realize that your real value is in the customer relationship and in how you orchestrate resources, not just in running a service desk or a NOC. So if I can find a master MSP that's running at OML 373839, they're probably producing pretty good service, and they're probably producing it at a pretty good price for me. And they could probably customize things such that if I'm OML4, I can orchestrate their activities so that they are differentiated in the marketplace and not just like some other guy who uses the same master MSP.
Yeah.
And so I think some OML4, I'll give you a related example. I was talking to a client of ours in the Southeast U.S. We met him years ago when he was about 7 million, and today he's about 22 million. And he's a private cloud guy. So he built his own data centers and has been providing cloud services and wrapped his managed services around it and all that kind of stuff. Doing very well. Good growth, high profit, high OML, high service quality. And I was talking to him the other day, and I said, how are your data centers? How many do you have today? Blah, blah, blah. And he said, you know what? We're getting out of the data center business. He said, we're moving all of our clients as fast as we can out of our data centers, shutting them down and pushing them to Azure and AWS, which is a big change in strategy. And I said, why? And he said, we figured out, and he's OML 3.7, 3.8, 3.9, somewhere in there. He said, we figured out we had a lot more value than just running the mechanical stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a huge amount of sense. And again, going back to what I said earlier, you are using metrics to prove what has been a gut feeling for me and for other people for so much time. And there's more, I don't want to overwhelm the listeners with too many statistics here, but there's a correlation, isn't there, in the report with the number of agents deployed by these MSPs from Continuum, the amount these MSPs spend with master MSPs like Continuum. There's a correlation there with the success. There's a lot to take in. So what I'll do, Paul, I'll share the links to the research itself in the show notes. But I think the bottom line here, isn't that, the data shows that Continuum partners are growing faster. They're doing better than those who are not. Yep.
I know Continuum doesn't want me to condition this. In that data set, which was a big data set at that time, that's fact.
Yeah.
That is a fact, and it raised my eyebrows too.
Look, I think the bottom line here is go and have a look at the report that Service Leadership have put together. I think Paul's done a great job. I think you've done a great job here of explaining it to people. I'm very conscious of your time. You're an extremely busy man. I can't let you go, Paul, though, just without asking you. You've already you've gazed into your crystal ball and given us one prediction there, which I absolutely think you'll be right about. The future of managed services. I saw some other research you did recently where you spoke to some more MSP owners like myself and, who had perhaps got out of the MSP business. How do people feel about the managed service model in general and master MSP model like Continuum? What's the sort of prognosis for the industry as a whole?
Yeah. Every year we do a point-in-time large-scale survey and ask the opinions of solution provider owners and executives, MSPs in particular, what they think, how bullish are they about the business today, over the next 3 to 5 years, where do they think it's going? And then we segment the results between the lower profit, lower growth guys and the higher profit, higher growth guys. So we can see the difference in opinion about the future of the business between the lower and higher profit guys. The higher OML teams versus lower OML teams. So at the end of 2016, I'm doing this off the top of my head, about 65% of MSP owners felt bullish about the next 3 to 5 years. About 17% felt bearish, and the rest were in between. About 65% bullish. At the end of 17, that had risen to about 73, 74%. And the proportion that were bearish had dropped to, I think, 6 or 7%. And if you look at the splits, generally speaking, the higher profitability guys were more bullish. The medium profitability guys were the least bullish. They were still predominantly bullish. And then the low profit guys, bless their hearts, were also very bullish. So, so generally quite good. And, their perspective was on master MSPs was at the end of 16, if I recall correctly and working from memory, about 17% materially used a master MSP. The majority of those who did intended to continue. And a fair portion, I don't think it was a majority, but a fair portion that didn't said they would investigate it. At the end of 17, all of those numbers had crept up about 3 or 4%. So those using it were now up to about 21% of MSPs using a master MSP. The proportion who were that intended to continue was a little bit higher, and the proportion who weren't but intended to look into it was also a little bit higher. So I think the whole concept is gradually gaining ground.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Managed service industry looks rosy. The master MSP model seems to be the way that the most successful MSPs are going with this. And I'll give a big shout out actually to Continuum. They've put together this dedicated web page where you can download the report, and they've got lots of useful bits and pieces to pull out of there for MSP owners. I would encourage anybody listening to this, check out Service Leadership, check out Paul's work. this is a man who knows what he's talking about and has got the figures to back those claims up as well. Continuum have done a great job with this, making this report available to people as well. So in the show notes, we will link to the report, to the white paper, and how you can find out more about the Master MSP model and Continuum as well. Paul, I think your PA is going to kick my backside if I keep you for much longer today. So thank you so much. It's been fantastic to catch up with you. I know how busy you are, but I really appreciate you just jumping on a call with me and going into some of those figures. I was astonished when I read the report, and I'm pretty sure you had the same sort of reaction as well, didn't you?
No, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I know you're also very busy, and you clearly did your due diligence to get ready, so I really appreciate that. Yeah, the opportunity to talk to your community and to you. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it. Just before you go, if anybody listening wants to reach out, wants to get in touch with you, where's the best place they can find you?
Paul at service-leadership.com.
Fantastic. I would encourage anybody to get in touch. Paul, enjoy the rest of your day across there in Dallas. I'm going to go enjoy the beautiful sunshine here in Newcastle upon Tyne. We've got Dallas-like weather. I'm sure it's only going to last a day or two longer, so I'm going to go and enjoy it while I can. Paul,
enjoy.
Thank you for your time, mate. Appreciate it. Take care.
Yeah. Take care.
Thanks for listening to TubbTalk, the podcast for IT business owners. You can find the show notes and bonus content for this interview, along with dozens of other interviews with IT business leaders, over at www.tubbblog.co.uk. If you enjoyed this podcast, then we'd really appreciate you rating and reviewing the show over at iTunes. Every review helps us reach new listeners and helps raise the bar for success in the IT industry. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak with you next episode. Have a great day.